Okay, gentlemen, we are recording and we are back with another episode of My Uncle's Escaped Alcatraz, episode 25. And today we're going to kind of continue what we did last week, answering our listeners' questions. We got some more coming in. We didn't get through all the ones that we did last week. We got like a handful from last week's list, but we got a new list. And the one thing I want to kind of, listeners have been asking online for us is that they're kind of equating us with the federal government being a little bit too cagey with information, and Mike was able to answer one of them about that. Listen, we're not being cagey on purpose. Okay, we're not withholding. We just we're just excited about this story, and we're excited about some of the new information that we've garnered through our research, and all I can tell you is that we're working on something bigger here. So to just be patient with us. It'll be worth it because
I just want to jump in and also say, if we reveal sensitive information too soon, it could jeopardize future endeavors we're working on, and it could jeopardize those, and we don't want to harm the story, so that's why we're holding back on some information.
Exactly. And we have some help from some very talented and influential people who have joined our team, which we will reveal to you when we can. But just let us, we're sorry if we're being kind of cagey that way, but that's why. That's the reason why. This thing has kind of taken on a life of its own, and we're getting some resources to really kind of dig deep and investigate this and prove that these two guys made it, as well as Frank Morris down there. But we don't want to release anything until we know for sure. So please stay tuned, and we'll have more information for you. So with that said, I think we left off here. I think we got through all Patrick's questions, right? I don't know. Oh, wait, no. I mean, did we do the one about Fred Breezy from the 1992?
I don't.
Oh yeah, we did. I think that was the last one. We talked a little bit about why the audio was not released. It's because it's a little hard to hear, and we had it cleaned up and stuff like that. But we can talk about that. That's another thing that we can. I think better was probably just kind of we can talk about it and kind of read from the transcript. We can possibly do that. And then Patrick also says, why hasn't anyone gone down to Taro? How do you pronounce the town again, Mike? You always pronounce it right.
Monteiro Lobato,
Brazil, and to do some serious effort in locating him. That's a question that's going to be addressed soon. That's one of those that we're working on.
Well, I will say this about Monteiro Lobato. We've sort of touched on it a little bit. Ken and I did go down there 2 years ago for the Expedition Unknown episode, and we spent a week in the town. And we did talk to some of the locals, and they shared a story with us, the older people who were there, that in around 1970, thereabouts, 3 Americans did come to the town and hid up in the mountains for several months. And there was a guy there that was sort of you can call him sort of a sheriff. He was sort of the town's protector. He wasn't there in an official capacity, recognized by the government, but the townspeople sort of looked to him to be like kind of the guy to watch out for us. And they heard there were Americans hiding in the mountains. They were a little concerned, wondering why are they there? And so he went up there, and this mountain is literally cut out of the jungle. It's very high. The town's already a little bit at elevation, and then you have to go up about another mile, and it's almost straight up. It's a very arduous climb, and it's just this little teeny path cut out of the jungle. It's just dirt, slick. You can't see more than 5 feet in front of you. It's very thick. And at the very top, it sort of plateaus. It sort of levels out, and there's a rock formation that sort of extends from the side. So it's sort of like a protection. And actually, when we were there, it was raining, which it does frequently. And we were all hiding, or not hiding, but we were sort of pressed against the side of the rock in a protection from the rain. So it does offer protection. And so we went up there for several hours and we did some excavating up there with metal detectors. We found the 1951 Lincoln penny, which had no business being up there. I mean, that proves that Americans were there, because Montero Lobato is a very small town. Probably no more than 1,000 people live there, if that, probably in the hundreds. And this is now, 60 years ago, it was probably much smaller. It's sort of like a truck stop. There's a main road that goes through it. There's the main highway, and this town is there. Sort of like if you go through Texas, you go on Route 66 or one of the other routes, you're going 20 miles between towns. There's just nothing but dirt and scrub brush, between the towns. And it's kind of like that there, because it's a very rural part of Brazil. And why were Americans there? And we asked the people, did Americans come here in the 70s? They go, no, there's nothing for them to come for. There's no reason for them to be here. So that's why they stood out. That's why the guy investigated. Why are you here? We found the penny with the metal detector. Only Americans would have an American penny. The locals wouldn't have it. It's very remote, very rural, very poor little farming community. There's no reason for them to have American currency there, because it's literally in the heart of Brazil, in the geographic center, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miles from the borders, from the coast. So it's sort of like an island in a way. We also found a gun shell casing from a pistol that was an American-made bullet, and it had been fired. It was an expended shell, and it would make sense that the three would have guns with them for protection in case they tried to get arrested, or they came across some bad guys and you're in this remote spot. If they're coming after you, you only have guns as your self-protection. We also found a lighter that was buried in the ground about 6-8 inches. And that would also make sense, because Clarence and John were smokers. So it would be believable that they'd have a lighter with them for cigarettes. And then we also found, I can't remember if it was one or two, several rusty nails, at least one rusty nail. So most likely, we also found some gardening implements, some gardening tools.
Yeah.
And so it would make sense that at some point they build a structure for protection against the elements, because they were there for several months. And the wood has probably long since deteriorated, because it's exposed to the elements. It's not going to last very long, and this is 60 years later. So only the nails are left, the rusty nails. So there was probably some kind of like a crude housing of some kind up there while they stayed for protection. And we found that within just a few hours. A very brief, very superficial, look at that area. We believe there's more to find. Unfortunately, it was starting to get dark, and there's no light up there whatsoever. Like I said, you're literally in the middle of the jungle. It's pitch black. And when we came down the mountain, we had to wear headlamps just to see. And it was very slick because of the rain. It's muddy. It's like that clay kind of mud. So when it gets wet,
it's very slippery.
Very slippery, very dangerous coming down. Fortunately, we all made it okay. So yeah, we definitely want to go back there, talk to more people in the town, and talk to the people in the valley where we believe the farm was, where the picture was taken. It was in the valley where all the anthills were. Millions of anthills in that area. We saw so many of them, countless numbers of anthills. So there's a lot. We know there's a lot more to find. And we didn't get a chance to look at the house that Fred Breezy had taken a photo of. That's on an elevated hill in front of a lamp pole. And we know where the house is. Unfortunately, because of the shoot schedule, we didn't get a chance to go up there and talk to the person who lives there to see if he had any information or any background. So a lot to investigate when we have a chance to go back.
Yeah. Something to kind of add into that is, like Mike was saying, the residents were, when we asked them about the American people show up there, and they were like, no, never. And so you have to ask yourself also, what was Fred Breezy doing there in 1970? I mean, this was out in the middle, as Mike said, this was out in the middle of nowhere. And what reason did Fred Breezy have to do with being in that little small town? And we know he was in that town because we have photographs of it.
Yeah.
So, and he clearly, on the back of the house that he snapped a picture on the hill, he said that this was where John and Clarence first lived. This was their first house. Yeah. So clearly he was there for a reason, and it wasn't to sightsee.
Yeah. What were you going to say, Sam?
I'm curious. Sorry, I'm curious. Did you guys keep that stuff that you found, the penny, the shell casing?
Yes.
You have it?
Yes, I do.
Oh, good.
See, to me, I mean,
That's good to know.
that is good to know. I mean, to me, the significant piece is the penny.
Yeah.
That to me, I mean, those other items you could, shell casings, gardening implements, rusty nails, all that kind of stuff, you can find pretty much anywhere. But an American penny in an area where they don't, you would never
there's
see
no
a
currency
penny.
at that point.
Excuse me?
There's no currency. There's no American currency there.
I know.
Yeah.
And the spot
and
where
when
we,
go ahead, Mike.
I was gonna say, and the spot where we found the penny, like I said, it was really close to where the rock face was, and it's kind of a sandy area, and there was some burnt wood there. So it would be a spot where you would, if you wanted to get warm up there, you'd burn a fire near the rock face, because like I said, it extends out, so it protects you from the rain and the elements. And so if somebody is sitting there to get warm by a fire, it would be a spot where it fell out of your pocket. And then it was, like I said, it was about 6-8 inches deep. So it wasn't just recently there. We found it like, hey, I found a penny on the surface. We had to, Ken found it with the metal detector. We started digging, we brought it up. And if you watch the Expedition Unknown episode, you'll see that moment where we find the penny. And, of course, Josh is really excited. Hey, we found a penny. And for it to be an American penny was just remarkable. And this is a little pet theory of mine. I can't prove it, but I find the date significant for 51. I mean, yes, it's about, if this was 71-ish, this is, 20 years after when the penny came into circulation. But John, when he came back from Los Angeles, and, Ken talked about this several times, where they had all this money, and we have photographs of John's car that he purchased. Well, the year the car was made was 1951. Mm-hmm. And that car was his baby. He loved that car. He took several pictures in front of that car, and one of them having the Mexico placard that we've talked about that show that they were in Mexico at some point, either before or after he bought that car, and he put it on the front of his car. And there's a photograph of him, kneeling down in front of the car, in front of the placard. So I kind of wonder if he had that penny as a reminder of this car that he really loved. But that's just my pet thing.
Yeah,
I will say this about the lighter. So the lighter was in the case. The top was missing, and the outside of the case was very, very worn. I mean, you couldn't really. There's some type of a design on there, but you really can't make it out.
Well, there's a lot of rust on the outside.
Yeah. So I had a theory that there could be something inside of the lighter itself. So I'm gonna bring Art back into this conversation. So I got with Art, and Art had a detective separate the two items, and it took us a little bit to kind of pull it out. But the inside was, I mean, you would not have believed it was in the ground for that long. And they dusted it for fingerprints, and they found one ridge vent of a fingerprint on the lighter. And Art always cautioned to me, I don't know why, he said, anytime you hold this lighter, make sure you wear gloves. In fact, when we were doing it, they were constantly holding gloves to it. So, my theory was, if it is a lighter that belonged to Clarence, he undoubtedly was using it. You have to use your hands to stick it back in. It was a Zippo lighter.
I was just going to say, was it a Zippo?
Yes. And so putting it back in, he would have touched it, right? So they did find a fingerprint, but it was only one ridge. He said it was a ridge vent or one line. So it wasn't enough to actually get a fingerprint from in a match. But
I mean, my question,
other stuff inside there that they didn't look for, like DNA.
Yeah, I mean, my question is, could you get a Zippo lighter in that part of South America at that time?
It's a good question.
I mean, Zippo. I mean, we'd have to do the research on that. I mean, but as far isn't that an American company?
Yes. I don't think it was something that was an item that you could easily purchase in Brazil.
Yeah.
Especially in that area.
Exactly.
I can't even imagine that there would be something there. But I can send you pictures of the lighter right as we found it, and also with it separated. So you can see how, it's actually very pristine on the inside, which is shocking. Because when Art was looking at it, he was convinced that it was going to be full of mud and it wasn't going to be anything there. And when they separated, he was like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe how nice it looks."
Yeah.
I mean, it was actually protected all these years.
Yeah. Well, I'll do some research on the Zippo company and see if that.
Okay.
But Cindy's got, believe it or not, a question about art.
So Patrick McLuhan, he also wants to know what's going on with Art. He says, I was hoping Art would have been on by now so we can clear up some things and get his thoughts on the book and the research that was done. And we agree, Art. So if you're ever listening,
He's listening.
we would love to hear your thoughts on the book and have you back on and have some questions for you. And yeah.
And talk about what we got brewing.
Exactly.
Yeah, I would have to say that I'm a little not shocked, that Art hasn't jumped back on yet. Me and Art have a really good relationship, and I know he's, like you said, I know he listens to these podcasts. I send them to him, and I'm sure he follows them. But yeah, I mean, me and him's had very heated, I don't say heated debates, but we've had debates about the theory of what happened. And I'm okay with having a debate with anyone about this topic. I mean, because like I said, all Mike and I bring to the table are evidence that we found in the FBI files, newspaper clippings, or either family stories. So it isn't something that I've made up or Mike's made up, and I'm willing to lay it out on the line. And I'm all for Art sharing anything he wants to share with us. I mean, it's like you said, 65 years. What in the hell is going on? Why is this such a secret that they're still keeping it 65 years later? I mean, come on. Is this going to destroy the nation if you tell us, what's behind redacted FBI files? No. So,
yeah.
Why he's not wanting to reveal this stuff, I have no clue.
Well,
unless there's something there more than what they want the public to know about.
Of course.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so much here. And we've run across this so many times. They don't want to admit they made a mistake or admit that they could escape and get out and live. I think that's the biggest thing. I mean, Alcatraz was such an iconic prison where you knew, if you were going to Alcatraz, that's it. You're on the rock. You're not getting off. These guys got off and they lived. So that doesn't look so good. It doesn't look so good for their whole, campaign.
My theory is it's the Mickey Cohen connection that kind of.
That's what I think it is.
I think there's a lot more there that we don't know.
True.
I
mean, the whole Kennedy connection.
There's a lot
of stuff.
There's a lot of entrails there that connect other things that would open up other things, which is probably why Art only got 3 pages when he took over the case. That to me, if I'm correct, wasn't it it was 3 pages, he said. Wait.
Yeah. And again, why did it take over 15 years for the FBI to turn this over to the U.S. Marshals?
Yeah, that doesn't make sense either.
That is crazy in itself there.
Yeah. Because, as we heard from Lenny, FBI can't find anything.
No.
Right. So, okay, the next question is from Bennett.
Don't say the last name.
From Australia. And his question is, has anyone reached out to the Morris family, relatives, or anyone with any information about what happened to Frank Morris?
I would have to say, the only person that's reached out to any supposedly family member that Morris had would have been U.S. Marshal Geitz when he was trying to find some relative that he could use the DNA to compare against the bones that he had exhumed. As far as I know, I don't know of anybody that's even related to Frank Morris.
Yeah, I mean, your family is an unusual situation because of the size of it. The fact that their immediate family was 14 siblings. I mean, so you have a lot of DNA information and family history. From what you've told us is that Frank's family history was pretty truncated, and his mother wasn't in his life, and he was kind of on his own. and he more than likely I'm sure he got married like the other guys did, and like we posted that photograph last week of which
the
is
shocking resemblance.
It's shocking.
It's unbelievable.
It is.
I mean, we do want to research more and start digging into Frank Morris and find out what happened to him and to this boy that looked just, good.
Well, he's a man. He's a man.
Looked just like him.
Right.
Yeah, and evidently when Dykes was trying to find the Morris family, he found some very distant relative of Frank Morris. So, and they were like in the Midwest or back east or something, because Frank Morris was, he was in the Louisiana area, and that part of the country. But we don't really know of anybody else, and we don't even know who that person is that Dykes even found. So for Morris, it would be a very hard trail to follow, because they're not even sure who the father was of Frank Morris. The mother had claimed it was this guy who gave Morris his last name, but even then there was a little suspect of, was he the real father? He was the named father. So it could be somebody else completely different. We don't know, because it's, he was born in 1926. She was 16 or 17 at the time, kind of a wild child, rebellious against her. She kind of grew up in a, somewhat affluent middle-class family, and she just rebelled against that and ran away from home at an early age, and just was not meant to be a mom. And that's one of the problems for Frank Morris, was he was in a lot of foster care growing up and just was angry. He rebelled too against society, because he just, a lot of those places were terrible.
Yeah.
Got into crime in his early teens, and that just kind of set his path. But he was also very intelligent. He was a very smart guy, could figure things out. And, we, in the book, we asked the question, what would he have done with his life if he grew up in a real stable, loving home? What kinds of things would he have done? But because it was not meant to be, he turned in a very different direction. So it would be hard to find somebody, I think.
I may have asked this before when we previously posted that picture. Do we know the name of that person, that photograph that looks like Frank Morris, and where did you guys get it?
Well, I don't want to reveal too much, because we don't want to give away everything that we're working on. But
okay,
I will say this. So the person that we believe could be John's wife, she has a friend who had this photo on her page. So when I saw it, I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is Frank Morris!" And then I was like, "Wait, no, this is not Frank Morris.
Got it.
It's a different person." So, I believe I could say this about people who wants to know what happened to Frank Morris. If and when we do find John and Clarence's children and or wife, they are still either connected somehow or still friends with whoever Frank Morris married and had children with. I don't know. Well, if he didn't even marry, he had children with them, because this person looks too much like Frank Morris not to be related to him. Yeah. And would be on the same page that we suspect this is John's wife. So undoubtedly, that's too much of a coincidence.
Yeah.
So hopefully at some point in time, when we do find answers and relatives, we will find what happened to Frank Morris.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
All right. So this is also from Bennett in Australia. It's an interesting question. How often would maintenance plumbers need to go into the utility shaft behind the cells?
I'm assuming you're probably talking about it at the cell in Alcatraz.
Alcatraz.
Yeah, that section that they were able to get access to.
My understanding, they didn't go back there. I mean, it's plumbing. So unless they had some major leak or plumbing issue, which it didn't sound like that they did. And in fact, whenever they sent Wes into that corridor to clean up, I guess they were sprucing it up a little bit. They had some previous work done in there. That's when he finds the hacksaw blades that had been buried, hidden. So it doesn't sound like they went back there too often.
And if they did, they would send one of the inmates back there to fix it.
Yeah, and it was, I've been in there. It's very dark. It's very probably damp. It's probably someplace, like you said, that a guard's not going to want to go in there to begin with, and that's one of the reasons why they took Alan West and said, "Hey, you go in there and clean that up." And they probably, in fact, I even think Alan, in his testimony, said that the guard stood at the entrance of the door while he went in, and he's on his hands and knees, kind of cleaning and picking stuff up, and that's when he found the hacksaw.
Well, and he also said that the blades had shown signs of being there for many, many years. It wasn't, they were not brand new. They were oxidized, you know, a little rust on the surface. It was kind of dusty, dirty. So if there was sort of regular visitations, somebody would have found them before Alan West had, either an inmate, you know, because obviously these are prized possessions. If you find saw blades, you're gonna take
saw blades.
Yeah, you're taking those. You're not going to leave them behind. Or if the guard happen to go there for some reason, you know, there's a chance that they'd be discovered. So plumbing is plumbing. You know, these are big steel pipes. They were industrial strength piping. If you see pictures of it, they're not little teeny things that we have in our homes. They're big and thick and robust. You know, they're made to last. So probably very, very infrequently would anybody need to go back there.
And there were no lighting in the corridor, so it's not like you could flip a light switch and it lit the place up. Anytime you went back there, you had to have a flashlight. So the chances of them seeing anything, even if they was to shine a flashlight in there, is probably not very good.
And actually, what the brothers did when they were working on the dummy heads and the false grills, they couldn't hide them in their cells because there was the issue of the shakedowns, where the guards would pick a cell at random from time to time and shake it down. They'd have the prisoner get out, and they just tear that cell apart looking for contraband, you know, for saw blades, for, you know, whatever they're not supposed to have in their cells, you know, that they would try to hide, which was very difficult because the cells were very small and very Spartan, not many places to hide things. So what they did was they would hide their items in the utility corridor, so the guards wouldn't find them if they had a shakedown. So they knew that the utility corridor was not frequented very often, and it was a very good place to hide things until they were able to create their work area on top of the cell block, which was many, many weeks later. So for a number of weeks, that's where they hid their items because that was the safest place for them.
Right.
Cool. All right. So I'm going to jump ahead here. We have one from Dana. I don't know where she's from. One of her questions is, were they in the blue Chevy that was stolen? Any truth that Frank Morris's uncle or cousin brought envelopes with cash to visit in order for guards to be paid off and look the other way? She's saying that this was in a YouTube video of him describing this.
Yeah, I've watched that video, and I'm going to bring Art into this conversation. I asked Art about that, and he said that they investigated, the U.S. Marshals investigated this individual. They could not tie him at all to Frank Morris. There's been a lot of people that have come out over the years and said, I'm related to Frank Morris, or I'm related to the Anglin brothers. We had a lady up in Washington State that claimed that John and Clarance lived right next to her and that her best friends were married to him. And I mean, so you have a lot of people that have come out and say things. I really do not believe that, even though back then the guards, you know, didn't make a whole lot of money, it's not like the guards of today, where you have a lot of, I won't say corrupt guards. I don't think that was that case back then. I think they really held a high standard to their work environment and their work standards. Even Michael Esslinger, he agrees with me. He does not believe any guard was ever paid off. So that part of the story, I don't believe. And then as far as the blue car that was stolen, there was a car stolen, but then again, that car was heading north. And everything that we have been able to produce and show, all the way from Fred Breezy to the photos to Uncle Man, every bit of it indicates they went south. So do I believe they hung around and stole a car when they had an airplane, according to Fred Breezy? The next morning they were in Mexico? No, I do not believe they stole the car. that might have been a coincidence, but it wasn't them who stole it.
No.
And I just want to add one more thing about the guard question, which, yeah, I think I saw that documentary too, or that piece about
YouTube, yeah.
The guards looking the other way while the three were, or actually the four were digging and doing their preparations. How money can get to a guard from an inmate, I don't know how that's possible, because all the mail was intercepted. What they would do is they would actually, if you wrote a letter to an inmate at Alcatraz, it was actually retyped. The original letter was probably destroyed, and it was retyped and then given to the inmate to make sure that they're not containing some kind of contraband of whatever it might be, or secret message or whatever. So they didn't get the original letter. Any package they would have gotten would have been open and checked out. So how could they get cash that way? And even the inmates, they had a little account of money that when they worked on the island, they would get paid. And then that money was put into an account. And then when, like we mentioned this, I think last week or the week before, when Frank Morris bought some magazines, we have a document that shows him getting some magazines, and the amount was put on the thing, and then that money was taken out of his account. So they never actually handled money. So how could anybody smuggle money?
Well, I agree with you. You couldn't smuggle money into the facility, but when you have someone like Mickey Cohen, who has so many tentacles both inside and outside the prison, I'm sure they could have funneled money to them on the outside as well. So
that
happens a lot.
Yeah, but this individual didn't. I mean, he never mentioned Mickey Cohen one time. He never mentioned, I worked with Mickey Cohen and we were able to, pay a guard off. I mean, the way he tells the story is he traveled out to Alcatraz, and who does he know out there? And there's no indication that Frank Morris nor the Anglin brothers ever had any visitor. So he claims he went out there and visited Frank, and while he was out there, he paid a guard off. Now that's not what happened. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
No.
And then another thing about the guard, Charles Herman the German that we've talked about.
Yep.
He was the only guard that was reprimanded for the escape. And the primary reason that he was reprimanded was the night of the escape. He was supposed to do his midnight check of the cells and the inmates, make sure they're all in their beds and there wasn't anything, suspicious happening. And he said he was behind in his duties. And so he signed off that he had, but he actually hadn't, because he would have gone, past his shift. And he had to be careful, because if he wanted to get off the island, he had to get off, before the boat left, or he's stuck there all night.
Yeah.
Can't leave until the next day. And he actually disputed the reprimand. He was given a month without pay as punishment for not doing his duty. And he protested. He wrote a letter against the warden, because the warden wrote a letter saying, we're reprimanding you because of dereliction of duty. And he wrote a letter in response protesting, saying he felt it wasn't fair, that he shouldn't be blamed for the escape. It wasn't his fault. And that was it. No other guard was ever accused of anything. And I can imagine that the FBI probably looked into the possibility that guards might have been involved, because that does happen on occasion. We've talked about that one recently a couple of years ago, where the woman with the two guys, that they convinced Kerr to help them to escape. And that does happen from time to time. And so I'm sure the FBI was looking into, were the guards involved? Did they help them? We mentioned before, Whitey Bulger, when he was at Atlanta, when he and others in the infirmary tried to escape, one of the guards gave him the saw blades to cut the bars from the infirmary. And he refused to identify who that guard was. And he wrote about it in a letter that he never said who it was, even though they were, threw him in the hole and withholding food and water from him, making his life really miserable. And he didn't break. And they finally sent him to Alcatraz, because the warden finally realized he's not going to talk. So sometimes guards are involved. And not one single guard was accused of anything other than Charles German. So I think the idea that the guards were somehow helping them in some way for bribes, there is zero evidence to show that.
Yeah. Well, this is kind of a guard-related question too, and I don't even think we've ever. I don't know if we've talked about this. And they're asking. This is from Stian. Did the correction officers get some lead or warnings about the possible breakout before the breakout day? And I mean, me personally, based upon what you guys told me and reading the book, I don't know if they did. I doubt it.
There's no indication that they got wind of anything. The only thing that was really kind of surprising to me was, as Mike said, either they knew that boat was only going to be in that bay for that night, maybe another night. I'm not sure how long the boat was out there. But for some reason, they felt like that Monday night, it was a do or die night. And they hadn't even finished the boat yet. They still had some work to do on the boat. So they were taking a big risk by going and trying to finish this boat in a hurry, get everything together and get out there to the bay that night. Like, why couldn't you give it one more night? Why didn't you work on the boat Monday night and go Tuesday night? I mean, why would you chance trying to do it in a rush? Because they were so detailed in every part of the escape that you get down to that last day. Now it could be that they had some warning that the guards might have been tipped off. Could have been the reason why they said we got to do it tonight or we can't do it any other night. Maybe they were hearing that there was, they were going to do a shakedown, as Mike said. But I tend to believe it had to do with the boat, because you go back to Officer Chechen, who sees this boat out there. If that boat was out there for a week at a time, someone's going to spot it, just like he did. I mean, he went down to that marina, pretty much according to him, every single night after he got off of work, smoke a cigarette, unwind before he went home. He would have seen that boat multiple times. He only saw it that one night. So
now, do you think
it was that night or no?
Yeah. Do you think that the boat actually just stayed out in the bay that whole time, or it maybe came out to that location every night?
See, I'm not sure it came out every night, because again,
because to me that's more suspicious if a boat is just hanging in the bay all night, as opposed to one coming at night and then disappearing after a certain time frame.
That's the reason why I'm thinking that it was only there that one night. Now, if you stop and think about it, Sunday, everybody's out in the yard because it's not a work day. So all the prisoners are out in the yard. We have photos of this on a Sunday morning. That boat, and if they're out there with Mickey Cohen, that boat could have passed by and Mickey could have said, that's the boat. It's going to be there tomorrow night. I mean, I just don't believe that it was out there multiple nights, because like I said, if Officer Chechi, when he gave his testimony, he talked about going out there every night or every other. I mean, it was a lot, and smoking. And he did that as a way to unwind before he went home, because undoubtedly he was like on the second shift. But if he's out there in that boat and he recognized, because the very first time he saw it, he thought it was on. So could you imagine that he goes, oh, well, what is that boat doing out here again tonight? I saw it last night, or I saw it last week, and now all of a sudden here it is again. So yeah, I think it would have been very suspicious. So that might have been the reason why Frank Morris and my uncle said, we've got to do it tonight. Even though that boat's not finished, we've got to finish it tonight, and we've got to go tonight.
And just two more things I want to bring up about the guards probably not knowing. One of the things we mentioned this way back when we first started the podcast was, in a given year, because all the inmates were given raincoats, because of course it's San Francisco Bay, it's wet, it's cold, it's windy. Just, when you're in the yard, you need a little protection against the elements, because it's pretty miserable out there. Mm-hmm. And on a given year, they might need a replacement of one or two raincoats from a prisoner, from an inmate, either got lost, got stolen, got damaged, whatever, and that was for years and years. These things lasted. Well, leading up to the escape, the guy who was in charge of the raincoats for the inmates, he reported 30 or 40 raincoats needing replacement within a period of a couple of months, and it didn't arouse any suspicion. He didn't think that was odd enough to say something or to report it, like, hey, something's going on here. All of a sudden inmates are losing their raincoats. We need to check this out. They don't check it out. And then the other thing was, when they were on top of the cell block, that's their work area, their staging area, after they got permission to paint it. And Whitey Bulger I'm sorry, not Whitey, Alan West was, when he was first up there, when he finally got permission to paint up there, was kicking off dirt from the top where when the guards would walk by, and he was saying, "Hey, I'm just sweeping up, I'm cleaning up, there's nothing I can do." And he convinced them to hang blankets from the clothing area where John was assigned. So John gave Alan West a whole bunch of blankets to hang on the bars while he was supposedly cleaning and painting. And of course, that was the last thing they were doing. They just needed to cover it up so they couldn't be seen doing this. And they were up there for a couple of months, supposedly painting that a job should have taken a day or two at most. And yet the guards never once went up there to see their work, not one time. Had they gone up there just once, that was it. The escape is over. They would have been caught, because that's where all their materials were. That's where everything was. So the guards had no idea anything was happening, just from those two examples.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like, from what Whitey has told us about Clarence and John inside prison, they kept everything very close to the vest and didn't do anything wrong and followed all the rules.
Yeah. Thinking about those raincoats, it's kind of amazing. We have a part of a handbook that each prisoner is given. And it talks about the articles, pieces of clothing that they're allotted, and what to do if you needed to replace them. Like if your socks got holes in them, you're supposed to take those socks back to the clothing room. You hand them the old socks, and they hand you a new pair of socks. Same way with like your hat or your coat or everything. But these individuals with the raincoats, well, how do you lose a raincoat? Because when you go back to get another one, you don't have one to give back to them to say, "Hey, I need a new raincoat." They're going back and saying, "I don't have a raincoat." And I'm sure the question to me would have been, "Well, what happened to it? Because we gave you one. I mean, if it's damaged, give it to us and we'll give you a new one." Just like they would do any clothing. And what's really kind of odd is if you look at the photos of the cells of Frank Morris, John and Clarance Anglin, all three of those cells have their raincoats in there. They didn't even use their own raincoats. They're hanging up. So I guess the question that's kind of a little eluding me to is, one, why didn't they even use their own raincoats? And how do you go get a replacement of something that they clearly say in the handbook, the only way you get a new razor is you have to turn in your old one? Or the only way that you get a new jacket is you have to turn in your old one. How is it that they were able to go get new raincoats without turning in their old raincoat?
Well, listen, I've been in enough prisons doing documentaries that you'd be surprised on what I remember the first time I was in Corcoran State Prison, and I was seeing in some of the things that were in these guys' cells that they shouldn't have had. And the biggest thing was like when I walked in and I'm like walking around and I smell weed. It's just like, why am I smelling weed inside a prison? It's just like, so I'm sure they had inside methods and kind of like a little black market of what's going on that, someone that maybe
you got to remember.
And there, the guards, inadvertently participated because they would look the other way if someone needs another raincoat. It seems kind of benign. It's not like he's asking for a hacksaw blade or something else to chisel something out. I mean, it's like, what they probably think, what is he going to do with this vinyl and this rubber?
Well, you also have to remember too, they went back to the clothing room to exchange clothes. Well, guess who worked in the clothing room? John Anglin did.
And Mickey Cohen.
And Mickey Cohen. But if you came to me and I'm the one who's facilitating this escape, and you bring me your old raincoat, or you bring me say, "Hey, I need a new raincoat," it's easy to log it down and say, he turned in a raincoat, or we threw it away, or whatever. But the actual person who's doing the escape is the one working in the clothing room.
Yeah. Okay, so we got another. I think this is
this is a good question. This is from Olivia, and she says, if John and Clarence had established families in Brazil and therefore could not be extradited, what is the harm in telling the truth to their families before they pass away. What is the harm? There is none. I don't understand why they don't tell you guys. It just doesn't make sense.
Well, I'm not sure if the question is directed at, did John and Clarence tell their families, down in Brazil, the true story about them?
They might
any of
have.
them know? I agree. I mean, at some point in time, I would think that they left, information, even if they didn't say it out. Maybe they wrote a letter or whatever. But I agree with the other coin side of this question is, what in the world is wrong with the FBI or the U.S. Marshals 65 years later? If they're married, they can't be extradited. What is the harm in telling us the true story, laying it out all out? Why not give, like I've been trying to fight even to this day, all of the letters that the family wrote, John and Clarence, all of the photos that the FBI still has in their possession today. What is in those letters that they don't want us to see? I mean, you tell me. I still believe, like you said, Rob, this all goes back to Mickey Cohen. There is something in either one of those letters about Mickey Cohen, or there are other items that are in those FBI files about Mickey Cohen that they don't want us to see.
Yeah. And the Mickey Cohen, the Supreme Court justice connection, all of that stuff just doesn't, it all reeks of just kind of cover up.
Yeah, well, and think about this. So, Uncle Man tells his brother Alfred that Mickey Cohen supplies a boat, for them. And then you have a police officer who sees the boat. Well, the FBI dismisses this boat altogether because that could have backed up what Uncle Man said, right? So Uncle Man says, well, Mickey Cohen is the one who supplied them the boat. Now you've got a police officer who sees the boat. Oh, well, we got to get away with this police officer because we don't want to have any, tying together Mickey Cohen to this story whatsoever. Yeah. Well, if you're trying to do that, then there's more to the story and Mickey Cohen's involved.
Well, and we do have that letter from one of the investigative FBI agents who writes to J. Edgar Hoover saying there was somebody, he doesn't name him, but there was somebody in the island who had the means and the financial wherewithal to do this, who was recently released. I mean, he practically names Mickey Cohen just through the action.
Come on.
No, I have the letter. I have it unredacted.
Right. And he goes to him saying, that's the person we need to investigate. So this guy's doing his job. He's saying it has to be an insider who was recently released, who could set this up, who had the means to do it. Who are those people? And he sends that to Hoover to say, let's check on who those guys are, and then we can find out who provided them the boat.
Oh, well, and he even says, I'm pretty sure they probably had a boat waiting for them. And this is a former FBI agent that had already left the bureau, and he writes J. Edgar Hoover, say, hey, I know, y'all are working on this, but this is my thoughts on what happened. And he pretty much, as Mike says, lays it out. Doesn't say the guy's name, but he pretty much lays it out. And as I've said before, that Alcatraz was an island was so small with inmates. You did not have inmates leaving all the time. It probably wouldn't even be unusual to have to go several years with no one leaving the island, like being paroled or ending their sentence. So not like today where you have a prison with thousands of inmates going in and out every single day.
Well, federal prisons are still like that. You don't have a lot of people going in and out. Once you're in, because when the federal government prosecutes a case on it, I mean, they have a 98% success rate in their prosecutions.
Okay.
So that tells you something. So when you go, into federal prison, you're there for the real time amount,
right.
Real time sentencing,
Well, I'm sure if you went and you looked, say like from 1960 or 59 until 1962 during the escape, how many people were paroled or let out, finished their sentence and left Alcatraz, not coming into Alcatraz, but left Alcatraz? I bet you would probably only find there was one person. And
I'm sure those records. I'm sure those records exist.
I'm sure if it was more than Mickey Cohen, maybe one, but it's not like for someone to come out like an investigator or even Uncle Man. Uncle Man says the exact same thing in 1992 when he's talking with Fred Breezy and the family. He said, "Oh, all you had to do was find someone who was leaving the island, and they could have brought the information off." It's like,
and
are you kidding me? Like,
so you have
exactly what happened.
You have Uncle Man and the FBI agent who's leaving and contacts J. Edgar Hoover with the same theory.
Yeah, same theory.
And even if, let's say, there are, say, 2 or 3 other inmates that were released at that time, some of them, sometimes they went to other federal prisons because Alcatraz was sort of a punishment of, we can't handle you here and wherever you are. And, you could be sent to another prison. Or if you did get paroled, you finally did your time and you get released. Well, what inmate who's been in jail for years has the money to get a boat, get a crew, get all this infrastructure set up for the escape? And why would this person take such a risk when they're on parole to help inmates flee or to escape? It becomes very unlikely that just a fellow inmate would have the resources and the desire to do something like that to help fellow inmates, other than Mickey Cohen, who had means and motivation and the financial resources and the whole, his whole organization set up to do just that. And he had actually done something similar for Candy Bar, which we've talked about. He helped her get into Mexico. He provided her a house. He provided her money. Provided her false IDs. Yeah. So he's already done that with somebody that's very important to him, and he was friends with the brothers. He knew them before the escape, and of course the friendship continued in the prison. Whitey talked about that.
Yeah,
and so if it's not him, I don't know who else it could be.
Yeah,
no, it's him. It's him. And then the other thing that I want to just say, because with Candy Bar, obviously he had he had a romantic relationship with her, so he had like a vested interest. But with your uncles and the brothers, why would he go out on such a limb for these 2 guys? They had to been they had to done some other types of work that the level of importance in his organization was elevated to a point where they were involved maybe just more in, they could have been involved more than just growing drugs for him. It just doesn't seem plausible that he would go to this length just because he likes these guys. Gangsters don't do that. It's all quid pro quo. With Candy Bar, it's one thing. But with the brothers, it's quid pro quo. I do for you. What are you going to do for me? Or what do you have? What information you have on me that I don't want getting out, and do I trust you? And then if I get you out, does that absolve me and I start a new life for you? You'll be forever indebted to me. And, when I call, you're going to come. And if I need something, you're going to do it for me. So
there you go. That's what I believe happened.
And also in the Breezy tape, he does say that the brothers, when they got off the island and then went on the boat, what was waiting for him on the boat was new IDs and clothes and money.
A new ID and money. The exact same thing that he gave Candy Bar.
Right.
Yeah.
But like you said, Rob, is there something that, so let's just throw the theory out that, that John and Clarence didn't have a business relationship with Mickey Cohen, which I do believe they do. And I think we can prove that. But so if he helps them down to Mexico, which is clearly where they were going, Fred Breezy says they were heading to Mexico, and they even made it into Mexico. So here you go a few years later, that right before JFK is killed, you have the person who shoots Oswald, okay? He travels with Oswald down into Mexico, comes back. A couple of days later, JFK is killed, and Jack Ruby is the one who, kills Oswald. He was just in the car with him a couple of days before that. So was it that Oswald was supposed to be transported down to this farm where John and Clarence and Frank Morris was at? They were going to hide him out. Was that part of the plan? And when it fell through and he gets himself caught and Jack Ruby takes him out, Is that the reason why the FBI doesn't want us to know where John and Clarence are? Do they have what would it do to the story of JFK when we find John and Clarence's children and their photographs, and there's a photograph with them and Oswald and Jack Ruby?
Oh my God, that would be crazy.
That would just set the whole story.
Listen, my tinfoil hat would explode. It would explode.
Why were they down in Mexico together 2 days before the shooting? Why were they down there?
Listen, as we know, and in the past, because I've done a lot of research on this, and as we know currently, information, security information, or information in general that the government has hands on, if they have a way of manipulating it for their end, they're going to do it. I mean, I'm talking to a bunch of people online right now in regards to former intelligence people who are talking to me and trying to expose a lot of the things that we're doing to government. Like and this I'll just sum this up real quick. And I didn't know this, and I just found this out from them, and they're making it public. That since 2020, when Biden took office, they did a deal with the Taliban, and the Taliban basically. So from that point on, from when he started office, and I could be off by a couple dates, but they have proof that a $45 million in cash, just straight cash, a week gets flown to the Taliban. So it's been happening since 2020. And that money is being disseminated. So they're trying to buy off the Taliban. The problem is the Taliban, it goes to other people. They split it up amongst all the terrorists. So we're basically financing terrorist attacks, and these very, very, very brave whistleblowers, and it's out there on the internet if you want to look it up. And I'm going to try to have the woman who's exposing this. Her name's Sarah Adams, and this and just incredibly, incredibly brave to be doing this. And so, right there, when you have something like that, and and they're doing it now, and you could have so much access to information and people right now, and it's still being done right in front of our eyes. You can't only imagine what, J. Edgar Hoover, that was kind of towards the end of his tenure with the FBI. He had so much power, so much power. I mean, he had presidents shaking in their boots. He had something on everybody, so I can't imagine that they wouldn't cover this up, you go
back and you think we were just getting into Vietnam. JFK wanted to pull out of Vietnam. Mm-hmm. So did his brother, and then of course when Johnson takes over, does he pull out? No, he goes even further into Vietnam.
Yeah.
And so, you just have to ask yourself, is there a reason why they worked with Mickey Cohen? Because you just have to look at, there is no way that you can explain to me how a Supreme Court justice, the chief justice, is the one who signs Mickey Cohen's bond to get out of prison. Mickey Cohen could have fled, he could have gone to Brazil, he could have never, but no, he comes back. And that same judge is the same one who heads up the assassination inquiry into JFK.
Forget about it.
Crazy
how this is not connected.
Right.
Whatever. I don't get. Listen, we're going to get to the bottom of it somehow. Yeah. Let's just find them first. Let's find them first and work our way back. Yeah. All right, guys. Well, listen, this has been fascinating. We actually didn't get through all the questions as we did before. So I know we're working on some other guests here. So hopefully we'll be able to get those guys on or those people on. But fascinating, as always. And like I said to our listeners and our audience, we have things brewing. So I know I'm being cryptic, but
we will release things.
So
just be patient.
Hang on. In fact, we're getting on a call right now after this podcast to kind of kind of work that stuff out. So
Exciting
patient.
day is coming.
exciting things going. All right, gentlemen, we'll
Thank
see you.
you.
We'll see you next week.
All right. See you later.
Bye.
Bye.